The average adult spends 8 hours a day in front of a screen right now. It was 4 hours a day in 2012. When you walk in nature, it turns off the part of the brain related to executive function. So your brain's actually taking a break when you're in nature. 15 times the amount of people in parks in China compared to what we found in Chicago.
How much time are people actually spending outside?
120 minutes a week is kind of seen as the minimum to get the health benefits. Most people spend a lot less than that. More than 95% of people's day is indoors.
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Laird Superfood. And I have a little story to tell. This past weekend, Kelly was traveling down in Los Angeles and sent me a text around 10 o'clock in the morning saying, I still haven't had coffee. And if you know us, you know that we're usually trying to drink coffee within like 3 minutes of waking up.
But
for
good,
better or worse.
Good coffee.
Yeah, good. We really care about good coffee and make sure we put really good quality things into our coffee. And we find it to be like a whole experience.
One of the things that happened is I traveled down for a big tournament, working with a team, and lo and behold, did not bring Laird, sort of our instant coffee with creamer, or didn't bring any creamer. So I always travel with those two things because number one, I stinking hate hotel coffee. It's the worst.
And you're not just talking about like the crappy coffee in the room.
No.
You're even talking about like you go down to the lobby and there's some coffee there. And
there's
like
also some brown hot liquid.
Yeah, it's also undrinkable.
Burnt. It's undrinkable. Yeah. And at this point, I hadn't had a chance to go out and get espresso, so I just chose to just be sad. And I called you and I was like, this world is just a dim place.
Yeah, and it was all because you'd forgotten your Laird instant coffee and superfood creamer.
Yeah, so two things. One is always travel with some, because you can find hot water everywhere, and then you have a delicious cup that meets your needs. And sometimes I actually really like the fact that it's got some great quality fats. If I've texted you many times where I'm like, look what I'm having. I'm like hard-boiled eggs out of a styrofoam bowl.
Yeah, from 7-Eleven.
And my Laird coffee, because like that's what I'm having now.
Well, and all of their products are made with clean, functional, real food ingredients.
Just whole foods.
It's whole foods. And so not only do they taste amazing, but you know that whatever it is you're putting into your body is really good quality stuff.
I think, one of the things that really helps me feel like a human being when I travel is having some good high quality ritual and being able to reach for either the creamer, which will upgrade any coffee. Like literally just saves it. And that bag of creamer is gold. Or that instant coffee, which means that I'm just set. I just think that thing gives me real control. And then if I'm in Vegas, I was at that conference and they didn't even have a coffee in the hotel room. And then coffee down there at the little market is
$12.
Oh man, I was just outraged. But fortunately, mischief managed because I have my own coffee and I'm under control. This stuff is so good. It is really like upgrade your coffee. Give it a shot.
So good.
If you want to learn more, go to lairdsuperfood.com/TRS and use code TRS20 for 20% off and free shipping.
Before we get rolling, a quick note from today's sponsor, The World as You'll Know It podcast.
Their new season is called The Future of Aging. And here's a stat that grabbed us. In just the last 120 years, clean water, vaccines, and antibiotics have added more than 30 years to the average lifespan, more improvement than in the previous 10,000 years combined.
Now a team of Nobel-level scientists is chasing the next leap. Can we treat aging itself? They're asking whether tweaking just the right molecule could buy us another 2 healthy decades.
The show cuts through the noise, no silver bullet hype, just conversations with top biologists, neuroscientists, and physicians who explain what actually drives aging and which interventions are grounded in data.
So if you care about staying strong, mobile, and sharp well into your extra innings, queue up for The World as You'll Know It, The Future of Aging, wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, let's get back to the show.
Dr. Maddock, welcome to the Ready State podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
We are very excited to talk with you about your area of expertise. And just by way of, for our folks, we have a common friend who's actually been on the podcast before. Will you just tell us where you are, what your day job is, and sort of how we stumbled into your amazing work?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a professor at Texas A&M University in the School of Public Health. And my department head is Mark Bendon, who you guys have had in the podcast. Mark is an expert in standing desk research and does a ton, and we collaborate all the time looking at improving the health and well-being of workers, especially remote workers, and looking both at standing desks and at access to nature in the same populations.
So Kelly and I spent our childhoods out in nature. Kelly in Germany and me in Boulder, Colorado, and then we both found a love for spending time on rivers, which is what we did for most of our 20s. So we are gigantic outdoor enthusiasts. So we require no convincing whatsoever about the power of nature from a health perspective. But you have actually been studying, the impact of nature on our health. How did you come to be, having this be your area of expertise?
And we should, and will you also just take a second and define nature?
Yeah, what is
do you
nature?
mean nature? Like walking in my car, is that nature?
So yeah, that's actually a great question, and one that I talk about all the time. Is nature is a gradient, right? And everything from a landscape parking lot actually counts as nature to being out in the wilderness. But there's obviously differential effects on your body depending on how much nature there is. And so we say, yeah, it's great if you have a potted plant. It's great if you have a tree out your window. But if you can get out into a park space, a blue space, which is all the water, or out into our national parks, those are going to have the most effect on your body. So we look at it as a continuum of nature, not just kind of a, yes, this is nature, no, this isn't nature. But the more green or blue you can get a space, the more healing effect it'll have on you. And so
you say healing effect.
Yeah.
Like double down on that. Double click on that for us. What do you mean by healing effect? Because that is that makes this assumption that we're sick.
Yeah.
We potentially don't have access to outside dynamic, high grade outdoors.
Yeah.
And then the follow up is, you mean that when we go outside we get better?
Yes. So think about our lives. Think about human species, right? We evolved for thousands of years, pretty much outdoors, right? 1950s, we had air conditioning, right? We start coming in a lot more. I'm here in Texas and starting to get hot, right? So we move inside. It gets real comfortable inside. We're really good at cooling and heating our places so they feel great. In 2010, 2012, we come out with a smartphone, right? And all of a sudden, our kids, us, everybody are sitting in front of a screen. The average adult spends 8 hours a day in front of a screen right now. It's unbelievable, right?
Yeah,
We're
that's
only
an average adult.
16.
That's not a super achiever adult like me who could easily spend more than 8 hours on it.
Oh, easily. Yeah. And my guess is it's more than that. Like every
I'm not
time I hear,
average.
they always say that too about sitting. Like the average adult spends 8 hours a day sitting. I'm like, nah, I'm going to say it's probably 12 hours.
Yeah. And it depends on how truthful people are too, but it's a lot, right?
It's a
It
lot.
was 4 hours a day in 2012.
Wow.
And it's 8 hours a day now. We doubled it in a decade, which the effect on our physiology is unbelievable. So what happens when you go into nature? What I like to say is there's microdoses of nature and there's macro doses of nature. So if you go outside right now, you find a community park nearby, spend 10 minutes there. It's going to reset your ability to pay attention. It's called attention restoration theory. So, we start our day, we kind of have that attention budget. After lunch, we're kind of, take that little walk in nature. You come back and your attention's reset to where it was in the beginning of the day. Just this past year, paper came out looking at what's happening in your brain. They actually find when you walk in nature, it turns off the part of the brain related to executive functioning. So your brain's actually taking a break when you're in nature. We also see in that 10 minutes this improvement in mood, right? We all feel good. It's like, feel good. If you're down, depressed, we see this change. So then go a little bit longer. If we take a 90-minute walk in nature, we see that it reduces rumination, right? One of the biggest things in PTSD, right? So our soldiers coming back, a lot of folks have dealt with traumatic events, having PTSD. 90 minutes can stop that rumination cycle.
Wow.
And then if you go out and you take a weekend in nature, right? And you do this thing called forest bathing, which is being super mindful in nature, right? Getting in, going through your senses, looking at the different types of green, feeling the wind on your face, smelling the different plants, touching things. It actually affects your immune function. It's something called natural killer cells, which is your body's ability to fight cancer, right? 1 weekend in nature significantly improves your level of natural killer cells for up to a month afterwards. So when I say heals, it's everything from that,
Wow.
hey, I feel a lot better, to my immune system functions better.
So am I right that Japan has a actual department of forest bathing
Yes.
and that they've made that sort of a national and political priority. Do I have that right? Like, what is
You
it that they're doing?
You do have that right. Japan is where forest bathing comes from, and it is part of the therapy. It's part of life there. It's, there's a much stronger connection in Japan between the natural world and human beings, and so they've taken people into the forest as part of therapy. It's seen as kind of going to the onsen or the national springs, and then getting out into nature and being present. It's got kind of that connection to the Zen lifestyle, right? So being in the moment, present with nature, and that affects your immune function.
So you recently did a study using something called a nature score. I'm hoping you could explain what that is. And I know that at least one of your studies, or more than one, was connecting nature with mental health, which I know you've touched on a little bit here. But what is nature score? How can we think about it? How does it relate to mental health?
Yeah, so I think you guys actually had Jared Hanley on maybe two
Yeah.
years ago, and Jared's part of the group that developed Nature Score, and great app. You can get this free on the App Store or in Google Play, and you download it, and it keeps track of how much time you spend in nature. And part of it, it's geocoded to how green every part of America is. So you can put in any address in the country, and you'll find a score from 0 to 100. So we said, okay, we'd like to look at this in Texas and see, are neighborhoods that are more green, do the people use less mental health services, right? So do you go to the doctor less for anxiety, for depression, for bipolar disorder? So we took all 1,169 urban zip codes in Texas, right? Texas is a big place. Got all of those. We got every single time somebody went to the doctor in one of those zip codes over the course of a year. And we looked at how green it was, right? And we controlled for socioeconomic status, for education and income and race, ethnicity, all that stuff. And we found that neighborhoods that were greener, people needed to go to the doctor less than people that were in neighborhoods that were less green. We have another paper that's under review right now, shows the same thing for cardiovascular effects. So having a green neighborhood really seems to improve both mental and physical health in a passive way. Like this, we weren't asking if people went outdoors. As long as you lived in a neighborhood that had lots of trees and lots of green space, you were healthier.
Let me ask you. I mean, I think a lot of us intuit that. Does that follow along the idea that there are a set of behaviors that people engage with in their environment differently if there's green? Is that what that is? Just by because it seems too simplistic that I have lots of plants and grass and I'm healthier. Am I hearing this right? Because I'm really trying to like, what would the devil's advocate say on the other side? What the null hypothesis, right? Help me understand. Is it that clear a relationship between density of and accessibility to all-cause mortality and morbidity?
Yeah. So the way I like to think of it is there's passive exposure in nature and there's active spending time in nature. And they're a little bit different, right? With the passive, so this we've known since 1984 was the landmark study here. Researcher took patients that had been to the doctor, been to the hospital for surgery. And they went and they got surgery. And when they were finished their surgery, they went to a room that either had a view out the window of a park or a view out the window of another building, pretty much on a brick wall. And he followed their charts after they'd been discharged. So they didn't know they were in a study. They were long gone. He found that people with a view of the park had less post-op complications, used less painkillers, and got discharged faster than the people with a view of a brick window. So that's total passive. It depended on what window you got, but there's to be something psychologically mediated that reduces our stress, reduces all this cortisol and everything else, and we actually do better just being in a green environment. So yeah, there is that simple piece. But then there's the active piece of actually getting out and purposely being in nature, which seems to have a little bit of a different effect on our body.
So, and that's insane because that's 1984, right? Which is, Kelly and I like to say, is in the 1900s.
Late 1900s, just be honest.
Yeah, that's late 1900s. But, what it seems to me is that, you have a lot more research to discuss with us, but that nature could literally be a health intervention. And I think Kelly and I randomly know this intuitively. In fact, we run a strength and conditioning and longevity program, and we actually prescribe for our participants to go outside for at least 45 minutes on the weekend each day, at least minimum, and play. Go outside and get into nature and play. We prescribe this as part of our program.
What you can't do is cut your treadmill as play.
No, yeah. I mean, we really say go outside somewhere, go outdoors and ideally nature. But, obviously some people live in dense urban environments, but, we still are saying go outside. Is there a future in which you go to your doctor and they actually prescribe for you?
Or is that already happening?
Going out in nature. Is that a thing? Could that be a thing?
The future is today. It's actually starting and been going around for a few years. So there's a group called ParkRx America that's nationwide. Any healthcare provider in the country listening to this can become a prescriber through ParkRx America. Go to their website. America. You can enroll. They've got a training video on it, and you can actually log your patients' visits and everything else into their website. Here in Texas, I'm working with Harris County Medical Site. So this is county Houston is in, and we are training doctors to prescribe nature here. So I trained 80 people 2 days ago. So we're doing it in Texas, and then we're working with the military right now to look at the military wellness clinics. And actually, we'll have 4 clinics online by the end of the summer that'll be prescribing nature for active duty military. Funded by a congressional commission.
Hold on. My mind is kind of being blown right now.
Yeah.
That we've actually, what you're saying is like water is wet. We're like, yeah. But then you're saying we've actually trained physicians to be thinking this way. When you originally approach physicians, do they grok it instantly, or do they look like you have like a hand growing out of your face? What is going on? Because
At the same,
the patient must be like, wait, you're prescribing a walk in the woods?
But it's weird because it feels so normal and makes, I think, such intuitive sense, and then also seems so radical at the same time.
Take the statin and also take it in the woods.
Right.
This is amazing.
Yeah, so I had 80 docs in front of me 2 days ago. I was on their dinner speaker, and I have not seen people more interested in a talk.
Oh my gosh.
And just they were eating it up. We had prescription pads. We gave away every pad we had. The enthusiasm among the medical community is so strong, I think, and even for themselves. So we talked a lot about physician burnout, and this really does seem to affect burnout symptoms. And so we're trying to get our docs out in nature themselves. There's a program called Walk with a Doc, where doctors can lead walks in nature, and people get to walk with them and talk, but everybody gets out in nature together. So it's a really healing kind of environment.
And when you're going in and training these physicians, is your talk sort of detailing the massive amount of research that supports the health benefits of going out in nature, and then
sunshine,
and then this secondarily, like practically speaking, what are you teaching them to do, like in clinic? You said you had prescription pads. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So yes, exactly. So I start the first 20, 30 minutes is all about what's the research say? Where's the evidence? What do we know? How do we know what conditions is good for, et cetera? And then on the prescription, it's a lot of the who, what, and when, and where, right? So where does a person feel comfortable being active outdoors? Where's nearby that they can go where it's like, I feel safe here. I feel it's a good place for me. What do they like to do? Are they a physically active person? Do they want to go hiking? Or is it, I want to sit in a bench and chill and relax? So kind of the activity, and then frequency and duration. How often should you do it? How long should you stay? And that's tailored to each person and to their health condition. There's different ones. If it's more of a mood disorder, it might be very short, especially if somebody's depressed, it's going to be hard to get them into nature. So we see even one visit to a garden a week actually reduces depression symptoms. So that'll be tailored to them based on the symptomology.
So my grandmother, who had an insane rose garden, was really just like a nature junkie. She was just like day after day, like hooking herself up with like some feel good.
Yeah, right. But what I love about this though is that it is expansive. It's not saying you have to go out into a national park.
It can't be. It doesn't scale.
And that on top of that, you need to be doing extreme exercise. I think sometimes that's sort of the perception. What you're saying is that you can get the benefits by finding some roses near a bench and sitting there. That the benefit doesn't have to be combined with physical activity.
Right. What's nice, we say that, my favorite saying is that physical activity in nature is the Reese's peanut butter cup of health promotion, because you get the peanut butter and the chocolate, and together they're better. So if you exercise in nature, you get all the benefits of being active and you get all the benefits of nature at the same time. That doesn't mean you have to be active when you're in nature. But if you can, like I tell people, if you can take one workout a week and you can put it outside, you're going to get all those nature benefits also. But if what you like doing, and especially for a lot of our older adults, sitting on that park bench is amazing and they feel amazing. And it's a destination. So you can walk to the bench, chill there for a half an hour, walk back, and you've got this great health promoting time in there.
I have a couple problems. I want to just jump in here. Number one,
What is your problem?
how does someone make money prescribing nature? I mean, like, so I think the problem first and foremost is that this is free and it can have a radical impact on my kids, my family, our regulation. My phone works like crap outside. I mean, which is probably by design, hopefully. I mean, it really is remarkable. So that kind of tongue in cheek. But the second piece is we're really, what you're hinting at is urban design.
Yeah.
And you're hinting at reimagining what neighborhoods look like, how important we need to be thinking about, or how we need to be conceptualizing the experience people have in their neighborhoods and around schools. Am I right in that way?
Yeah, and I didn't answer the question you started with, is how did I get into this field? For 15 years before I did this, I did physical activity and built environment research. So how do we build cities to get people physically active? And really got this awakening of like, it needs to have the nature piece to it, right? You've got to be able to connect. You've got to build kind of micro nature into cities so that it's everywhere you go, right? And how do we work with urban planners and architects and landscape architects to make sure that you can reach green space? And we collaborate a lot here at Texas A&M. Actually have a really good project right now with College of Architecture looking at heat. So here, obviously in Texas, but also in Chicago, a lot of northern cities are actually worse for heat because they don't have air conditioning. And we're looking at how we green cities to reduce the heat island effect. So you get not only the direct benefit of spending time in nature, but you get all these ecosystem services, right? So you get less temperature, you get less air pollution, it quiets the city down, right? And so there's a ton of benefits to putting green infrastructure into cities.
What cities are slaying right now and doing a good job? Because I think it's, we live in a suburban neighborhood with literally direct access to hundreds of miles of like remote nature. So I feel like people who live in environments like us are surrounded by it and it's impossible not to be interacting with it. But, most people live in cities. What cities are doing a good job, and or what cities are, have their eye on doing a good job and are trying to make changes?
I mean,
and what does that
I
mean?
could add in my zip code and kind of just do some, sleuthing. But
I mean,
there
I
have
was-
to be some markets that have been killing it.
And I have to think it's like planting trees and creating parks and making walking paths. And I mean, but what is it? Like, what's the secret sauce, and what cities are doing a good job?
Yeah, well, I can certainly talk about Houston, the city that I work in. Houston historically has not been known as being a green city.
Yeah.
Right? So back around 2010, they invested $220 million in this public-private partnership to build trails along the bayous. And so bayous all through Houston, their water drainage areas, put a 150-mile linear trail and all throughout the city. And it's off grade, right? So you're on the bayou, you're not going to run into a car, you're not going to run into a traffic light. You can bike and walk for 100 miles and never have it, affect with the car. So we did a study. We said, okay, let's look at folks that live in a zip code within a 10-minute walk of these trails. So 30% more population within a 10-minute walk. We found they had a significant reduction in obesity-related health emissions and ischemic heart disease and heart attacks. So people actually got healthier if they lived in neighborhoods with access to these trails.
And that was 100 miles. So at some point, we have to imagine that we're crossing socioeconomic backgrounds, we're crossing education backgrounds, because it's 100 miles.
Yeah, Houston's one of the most diverse cities in America, and it went through every different type of neighborhood.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So when we had Jared on, and I think you may correct me on this, but my memory is that he said that most people are spending something like 120 minutes per week in nature.
I thought it was less than that.
Is it less than that? Is
I
it
thought it was
20
like
minutes
20
per
minutes
week?
20
What
minutes
is
a
the
week.
date? Like, because, you said that, we all know, and I think people are aware that we're spending a massive amount of time on screens and indoors. And, especially in a place like Texas in the summer where it's so hot, you're indoors. So I think people are aware of that. But I think once you hear when people hear the actual data, it's pretty shocking. Like, where are we on that? How much time are people actually spending outside?
Yeah. So 120 minutes a week is kind of seen as the minimum to get the health benefits. Most people spend a lot less than that. And so we're seeing more than 95% of people's day is indoors. So it's really skewed.
95% of people's
Percent.
day is indoors.
Yeah. Or in a car, with a roof over your head. Like, so
Right.
it's very, very little time that people spend outdoors. We've got a big survey we're going to be doing in a couple of months this summer, nationwide survey trying to actually capture the most current data, 4,000 people nationwide, following how much time they spend in nature. But tend to be very little. It's kind of this, you've got a group that spends very little and a small group that spends a lot of time.
Yeah.
And then a few people in the middle, but it's really kind of almost a bimodal distribution.
I just listened to a little clip of Stephen Kotler, who has written like Rise of the Superman. And he's interested in a lot of diverse things around the brain, but he was saying that the pockets of the greatest sort of centenarian people who are living the longest right now, are in mountain towns who engage in the most outdoor activity. Does that track with what you're saying?
Oh yeah, because you're getting the physical activity and you're getting nature, right? And so it's a great combination, and you're just going to be, we all know activity is incredible for you, but doing that in fresh air and in a place where you're up and down and everything else is wonderful.
Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, I was going to say, so back to the active community thing, because I think this is so interesting. And, so it makes, of course, total sense to me that access to walking trails and trails would get people more access to nature. What else is there? Is it planting trees? Is it creating new parks? Like, what else really are the hallmarks of urban areas that are doing a really good job, or that should be shooting to do a good job?
Yeah, it's we're studying this stuff right now. There's a group out of the University of Louisville that has a big tree planting project. They're planting thousands of trees in Louisville, and they're looking at health status and seeing if adding all those trees actually makes a difference, right? So amazing right there. A lot of it is access and connectivity too, right? Like, you can have a park, but if you live on the wrong side of the highway and you can't walk there, like, that's a huge barrier, right? We do, on the programmatic level, we've been doing things like safe routes to school for kids. Like, I think you guys were probably around the same age. Like, a lot of us walked and biked to school when we were kids, and you go to today and like 95%, 98% of kids are getting driven to school, and so they're not getting that. That used to be outdoor time, right? That was outdoor time. That's gone now. And the schools, if you get there early and we can do a joint use agreement with the park, the kids can actually play in the park before the school begins. And vice versa, where community members can come to the school and get access to that green space if you're short on green space. So joint use with schools and community parks tends to be a really good one to add in the urban environment.
Yeah, we are very familiar with safe routes to school, and I started a walking school bus when my kids were in elementary school. Does that and this is a perfect segue, because I do want to talk about kids, because it's a subject that's near and dear to our heart on many levels. But if kids are getting physical activity in nature outdoors before school, does that also improve their school outcomes or their school focus? Is there research on this? Even if you're not doing it, are you familiar with that? Is that a thing?
It's definitely research on kids getting nature access during the day. Outdoor classrooms, green schoolyards have huge effects on attention, right? That whole attention restoration happens. One of the biggest things they see with green schoolyards is a reduction in fights. Kids are better behaved. And so, like, they're happy, they're having a good time. And when they come back to class, they're much more ready to pay attention.
Wait, were you saying country mice fight less than city mice?
Yeah, actually, I think Lisa, who's in the room, we've talked about this. It actually, I think, used to be a thing at our kids' elementary school that that recess would be something taken away from kids if they were having challenges. And I'm hoping that's not a thing anymore. Certainly there's ways to have consequences for poor behavior, but having them play outside, yes, less is definitely not one that we support, and my guess is not supported by the evidence.
Right. If a kid's having a behavioral problem, the worst thing to do is take away what's going to calm them down, right? So taking away recess, taking away time outdoors is probably the worst thing you can do with that kid.
This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by LMNT.
I want to talk about one of the ways that I know LMNT is the real deal.
Let's hear it.
I work at a university with a women's team. So imagine 18 to 22-year-old, total, they're Valkyries, they're amazing. They like LMNT.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have been saying this for years, that our kids like LMNT.
They're the ultimate like canary in the coal mine litmus test.
Yeah, I mean, if kids like something, then, pretty much as a product, you've won, because kids don't care if you've received it for free, if it's your friend's
if it's
company,
good for you.
if it's good for you. Like
Right.
Kids.
Hey, if you drink this, you'll be awesome.
No,
nah,
they don't
nah,
care
dog,
about
it doesn't
that.
taste good.
It has to actually legitimately taste good.
On
and this stuff
weekends,
does.
when we're in the end of the year tournaments, I bring a box, and I like to have all the women chug one in the morning. Just up levels us. It's gone.
Right.
Like people are like, hey, can I take one extra? I mean, I'm like, yeah, please.
they're all just pocketing
hydrate
them.
thyself. What's really interesting is we just got the lemonade, which is a limited flavor, and I'm going to start a petition, a GoFundMe, a change.org thing where I'm like, keep a lemonade around. And
Yeah.
I brought one lemonade, and I really feel like I just have a box, and I have to you try to
We're
give some
almost
away.
out of our box. I did. I gave 3 away to our dear friend who loves LMNT. I rubber banded them together, and I tried to do it when you weren't looking.
You were caught.
But you saw, and you were so sad. You're like, don't take my lemonade away.
Put the lemonade into an iced tea. You know what you have? Arnold Palmer. It's unbelievable. It's the greatest deal of all time. Look,
What's also cool, if I could just
Yeah,
interrupt,
finish.
is that you can try LMNT totally risk-free. If you don't like it, you can give it away to a friend of yours, and they will literally give you your money back, no questions asked.
Look, if you want to give it a shot, if you order through our link, you can get a free sample pack featuring 8 of LMNT flavors. And if you want to party your mouth, definitely try the sparkling. Go to drinklmnt.com/TRS.
We literally drink it every day. This episode of the Ready State podcast is brought to you by Momentous.
We're going to talk about 2 things. Number 1, our good friend, Darshan Shah,
Yeah, Dr. Shah.
just put up another infographic. And read that for us.
Let me read it. Up to 80% of supplements sold on Amazon fail quality testing, and up to 30% contain 0 active ingredients. 0 meaning, the label says it has protein in it, and it has 0 protein.
Do you remember?
That's crazy.
Do you remember that our good friend made a documentary, and he made his own sports supplement, in his sink, basically, right?
right.
It's that easy, and that brings us to why we are fans of Momentous. We'll only work with Momentous. You have to have supplements that are NSF tested,
Yeah,
which means
or
that they're
NSF certified for sport, which is an even higher
right,
level of
because now
certification.
nothing that is in that is going to get you popped, or since NCAA or WADA or USADA. I don't think people realize in the wild west of supplements right now, especially we see teenagers going out for proteins and things.
Right.
They are junk proteins. They are bulk, gross. The things that boys and girls are taking in high school particularly are the cheapest, grossest supplements you can.
Yeah, they're
you
gross.
cannot do that.
Yeah, and here's the deal. Supplements are expensive, and they're an investment. And if you are going to spend any money at all on them, you may as well buy products that are NSF certified, even if you're paying a little bit extra, because
You know what's in there.
at least know you're getting what you're paying for.
That's right. Recently, Momentous, who I think has just the best protein on the planet, from grass-fed cows, a little bit of some digestive enzymes
Yeah, there's
in there.
no artificial additives
Whey
or
protein isolate
sweeteners.
at the highest quality of whey protein isolate. So, I mean, it really is easy to digest and so tasty. So tasty. But, what we're seeing is a lot of us struggle to hit our protein goals. Adding in that protein is a good thing, especially for our young athletes it's tricky to get enough micronutrients and protein down your kids.
Yeah, or also the other demographic I would think about is like perimenopausal, menopausal women who have really not prioritized protein for most of their life.
Right.
It's really hard to get to those numbers without adding, 30 grams of protein
It's just so
powder in.
easy.
Yeah.
I tell you what, my test always is I take protein and I mix it with tap water and I put 3 ice cubes in there and shake it up. And if I can't smash it and enjoy it, then it's garbage.
Right.
And this protein passes all
Yeah,
of those
and it
tests.
also mixes really well into stuff. You can mix it into Greek
Yeah,
yogurt.
if you're
or
a crazy person, like you're
oatmeal.
mixing, like I'm
I'm always mixing it into stuff. I like that.
Raw dog that protein with tap water. That's what it's all about.
So check out Momentous's new amazing limited edition flavors: strawberry, spice chai, chocolate mint, and chocolate fudge. They are all so tasty.
To learn more, go to livemomentous.com/TRS. And this is key. Use code TRS and save up to 35% at the checkout.
Okay, so this is so up our alley. Our daughter plays water polo. She loves playing outdoors. She's outdoors for hours a day in a pool, and I know it's just a concrete pool, but she's under the sky a lot, getting a lot of the benefits. How do you move from the School of Public Health, where you're the dean at one point, into this? When did this sort of show up on your radar? Because here I'm thinking of my own graduate education in physio. We're talking about musculoskeletal care, and we're trying to deal with this biopsychosocial complex human being, and there's zero like conversation about it. There's zero application. We're not talking about it. The environment is just like assumed to be a healthy place. How do you get to where you are from where you came from? Because this is not an area of study that, it seems so complex to try to plant more trees and get people outside and to speak to physicians. Is it as a result of the system not working? Just tell us how you end up being the foremost expert in this thing.
I'll tell you kind of my awakening on this, which is really interesting. It was 2014, and I was a professor at the University of Hawaii for 15 years. So I'm out in Hawaii, and I get invited to give the keynote speech at the World Trails Conference in Jeju Island, South Korea. And I'm like, well, that sounds cool, right? And people are like, Jeju is the Hawaii of South Korea. And I'm like, I love the Hawaii of Hawaii. That's going to be fantastic, right? So I show up, it's February. I'm in my Hawaiian shirt and everything. It's like 40 degrees there. I'm like, this is not the Hawaii of anywhere. But I get out of the conference and I meet the woman who organized it. And turns out she grew up in Jeju and ended up being a newscaster on the evening news and had everything you'd want, right? Money and respect and everything. Gets burned out. She goes to Spain, and there's a trail that runs the entire length of Spain. And she goes hiking on that. And she has this epiphany, like, I need to be outdoors. I need to be in nature. She goes back to Jeju, builds trails all over the island, puts together this World Trails Conference. So I'm speaking to the people, and I've, had all the physical activity research. And I start looking into this, into this nature research and find, that study from 1984 about the hospital views. I'm like, what is this? And how come no one's doing it? And I meet everybody at this conference, and they're all the people that run the World Trails. So there's Swiss Mountain Federation, Appalachian Trail, Horn of Africa Trail, Tasmanian Trail. And they're the happiest people I've ever met, right? Their entire lives are spent on these giant trails. I'm like, what is going on here? And so, kind of stewed in my head. And a year later, I got offered the job as dean at A&M. So I moved from Hawaii to College Station, Texas. And
Same.
my nature was, yeah. Everyone's like, you did what? You did that? Why? And, went from like probably 50 hours a week in nature, always in nature in Hawaii, to like 4, in Texas. I'm like, I'm not feeling good. Like, start gaining weight. My blood pressure's going up. And I was dean for 4 years, and I was like, I got to get out of this and do something that I love. And luckily, this is how serendipitous things are. We have this one friend of the center. Her name is Cynthia Pickett Stevens, and she is a nature person. And so she got Houston Methodist Hospital, the #1 hospital in Texas, Texas A&M University, and Texan by Nature, which is a conservation organization that First Lady Laura Bush founded, to come together and create a center for health and nature that does this research. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what I've always wanted to do since 2014. This is like 2018. And so, so when I finished being dean, I became the director of that center. That's what I run today. And I get the best job in the world because all I do is study the healing power of nature all the time. And it amazes me every day how powerful the results are from the findings.
So we talked a little bit about, which is amazing, by the way, we talked a little bit about sort of the urban planning piece around this nature, right? Like you can sort of put it there. But then what is working from a behavioral change standpoint? I mean, is it just simply access? Like if people have access, are they using it?
Right. I'm
Or
thinking like the High Line in New York. It's
yeah,
transformed
right.
areas of
I
New
was
York.
thinking of, yeah, I was thinking, but how, is there research? Are you working on research? What's going on with sort of, okay, so we create, cities invest, hundreds of millions of dollars in investing in access to nature, spaces for nature. What's working in terms of getting people out there? Obviously, prescribing it in the doctor's office is one great way. But what about on sort of a larger level? What work is happening to
Right.
get people to actually take advantage of it?
How do we make it about money? No, I'm serious, right?
Yeah.
That if you do this, you will have a healthier community and you will save money.
Yeah.
I think about,
But more like, how do you get the actual people to go?
right.
Yeah.
That too. And then like, I'm interested in the sort of the back end where you're convincing municipalities to spend their money on trails.
Yeah. A lot to unpack there, but
Let's
lots
go.
of great stuff. Yeah, I think part of it is if you build it, they will come, right? If you put spaces like the High Line that are amazing spaces, people show up, and the one in Atlanta is amazing, and people love outdoor spaces. We did a study in public parks in Chicago and in Tampa, and if you've ever been to a public park on a weekday in a city, count how many people are there. 3, 5, nobody's there. And we started looking, we're like, why don't people go to these parks? There's all these great parks. And then I was in China. I was a visiting professor at Wuhan University, which I used to always say, no one's ever heard of Wuhan. Unfortunately, I can't say that anymore.
Yeah,
for
we've
good
all
reason.
heard of Wuhan. Thank you,
But I was back there
2020.
years ago. And so we did a study in parks. And we found that in a city called Nanchang, we found 15 times the amount of people in parks in China compared to what we found in Chicago. And we're like, why do people use parks here and they don't use them in America? And we looked at the way we built the park. And they built the park in China a lot like a pleasure park here in America. So you can think of Central Park, Boston Common, Fair Park in St. Louis, that are these parks with gardens and everything that are built for adults. And if you think about the vast majority of parks in America are built for children, right? Basketball court, playground, tennis court, etc. We don't use them as much. So having the design of the community fit the needs of the community, I think, is number one, right? Are we designing parks that are going to be for people? 2 is the push. How do we do behavior change, right? How do we convince people that nature is good for you? And that's, most people intuitively know it, but the prioritization is super low, right? If you were to ask somebody like, how would you feel about sitting outside for an hour listening to the birds? You'd be like, that's a waste of my time. Right? But actually,
on the Maslow hierarchy of needs,
Right.
It's not
Right.
right there necessarily.
Yeah. So this is actually really important, and doing it, and you can do other things. You can take a book out, you can, talk to a friend, you can exercise. And so you can actually double dip if you just move it outside. And so we're looking at some behavior change programs. We're also trying to bring more nature to people. So at the hospital at Methodist, we're trying to bring more nature into the hospital in the healing setting. So we're looking at the oncology unit right now and bringing in plants and nature sounds so that people, when they're getting their infusions for cancer treatment, can have nature access. And we're looking at what other places can we bring nature into the hospital to help motivate folks.
It's such a large sort of task to catch people building hospitals right now. I'm thinking about Marin General has some huge windows, indoor green spaces. They've really done that. I spent a lot of time in the hospital, and what I can tell you is Juliet and I are like, we don't want to die in a hospital. You get smaller and smaller. There's less and less light. There's less and less outdoor space. It really ends up, you're a rat in a box. I mean, it really, not to, paint too rosy a picture here. And I just think about how we're going to have this diffuse effort to blow this up in the atmosphere, so that when we have an opportunity to put trees in, or do you feel like there's a movement happening because intelligent design, it's part of education for architects now, it's part of the public health, it's in geography. Is that happening, do you feel like?
We're definitely seeing an awakening. And I think COVID really spurred a lot of people. It got people outdoors. And it got people in. That's how you felt better during COVID, right? You got outside into green space. And so at Houston Methodist, we're building a healing garden right now. And we're going to do horticultural therapy in the gardens. And what they do, which is really neat, is that the beds of the patients that are the most sick, that aren't mobile, are going to have views of the garden. So at least we're trying to build that in. So I'm seeing it more and more.
It has to be
also putting
structural,
in,
right?
yeah, building it in. Like we're putting in a live feed in the cafeteria to different nature plates. So actually get like a 24-hour film of Galveston
I see
Bay
this.
and
This is
birds.
Silo,
That's
right?
right. We're the same
Yeah, we're the
person. I
same
literally was
person. I
going to
was
say
like,
it's the
this is really
TV screen
important.
at Silo.
It's,
It's a TV show. Have you seen Silo?
I have not.
It's like a post-apocalyptic show where everybody's down underground in these silos, but they're projecting nature on the TV screen.
So, I think Juliet and I we ran a kayak school for kids with HIV and AIDS for 10 years. We had really, really sick teenagers come for a long time. And one of the things that happened is a lot of these kids were from dense urban environments. They didn't really spend time. They didn't spend time outside, and they couldn't swim. We had kids who had never floated before. We sleep outside, and we're outside 24/7. There's not a time where they're inside, maybe in the car for
Yeah.
a shuttle, but the
Yeah.
rest of the whole week. And what's interesting, a lot of those kids are really followed by their physicians. And so we got blood tests when they came back, and their blood tests would be very, very different. And that was the first time we started hearing about this psychoneuroimmunology, this idea that, you could impact this immune function just by sort of being outside, I'm sure it was the norepinephrine, it's all these things. I mean, how else can we track, and that sounds very commensurate with what you're saying in the hospital, is that we actually can measure and change outcomes if we expose kids and sick people to nature.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can pick it up in cortisol, you can pick it up in heart rate variability. There's a study that came out last year. It was ecological, right? So it's looking at people who lived in neighborhoods, but they found people that lived in high green neighborhoods had longer telomeres, right? And so telomeres is a sign of aging as they fray and everything. Natural killer cells I mentioned earlier. So there seems to be a bunch of biological effects that we can pick up, especially as somebody lives in a green neighborhood over years, right? So when you're looking to buy a house or a condo apartment, getting one in a greener neighborhood, if you're going to live there for 10 years, it's probably going to have a pretty significant effect on your life and even your aging process.
That's so crazy. I have to tell you, what you were saying about park design really resonated with me. Kelly grew up in southern Germany in the Bavarian Alps, and so we've spent quite a bit of time there. And we are big hikers, but I think anybody who has kids know that little kids don't really like to hike. And that was totally flipped when we took them hiking in southern Germany, because one of the things the Europeans do really well is they combine food and nature. So almost anywhere you hike, you can be way back in the backcountry, and all of a sudden there's a restaurant in the middle of nowhere in the
And you can get
backcountry,
Kaiserschmarrn and a beer.
and you get hot food served to you on actual dishes. And our kids were sold, and something about having a destination, being able to go get a special treat, whatever, it was like this complete change for them psychologically about like making hiking fun. And we don't really do that. I mean, you can go to some of the national parks and there'll be like food at the beginning of a trail or somewhere. And you even think of the German beer gardens. Like, we just don't do that. And it didn't occur to me that part of it was just this sort of lack of thinking around design, right? Parks are designed for children in many cases. And instead, if we're thinking about making beer gardens and restaurants and parks and places that adults would actually want to go hang out, then those parks might get used more. It just had never occurred to me until this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I love that point, and it totally gives me anyway. I have a book coming out in November called Hikes and Brews in Texas, where we went hiking and we paired it with a craft brewery. And so afterwards, we would go to a craft brewery. So we'll have 25 different
You
hikes,
nerd.
do, and then end up getting a beer.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. Do you think there's a time? It seems like if you grow up in this way, it's part of it. Mark Bendon, Professor Bendon, as we talked about, is seeing that. For example, I think one of his pieces of research is that you can actually, over a couple of years, you can really see changes in BMI across cohorts at like 4th and 5th grade. If those kids are just moving versus sedentary, we start to see the delta of like 2 BMI points each year potentially. So there's a huge spread. Is it too late for one of us who like maybe is urban, or is the body, our hypothesis is that it's self-healing and self-regulating. Do you notice a difference over time? Is it too late? Like if someone's listening to this and they're like, holy crap, I've got to get outside. Can I still derive those benefits even though I've
Been
become
inside for the last 20 years? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get, within 10 minutes, you're going to get the benefits. And actually, the people that get the most benefit from nature are the people that are getting no nature, right? It's that 0 to 10 minutes, just like physical activity, right? The first 150
Beginner
minutes gives you
games.
the huge benefit. Yeah, yeah. But we did see that we did a study looking at time spent in nature as a child and how much that predicted your time spent in nature as an adult. And we found a significant relationship. We split it up into what we called domestic nature, riding your bike, lying in the grass, playing with friends, and wild nature, hunting, camping, fishing, that sort of thing. And we found that wild nature is actually a much stronger predictor as of time in nature as an adult. And so what we've been looking at with some of our programs is how do we take folks that are in families that traditionally don't camp or don't hike and do that introductory thing. So there's a group out of Houston that we work with, and they do an introductory camping trip in the schoolyard. So they go to the green space in the schoolyard. They help people set up their tents. They teach them how to camp. They teach them how to have a fire and cook their meals so that when they do go to that state park, they have the skills to do it.
Oh, I
And I
love
think
that.
that's really important because it's a little bit of a learning curve if you've never done it before.
I was on a recruiting trip with my daughter, and we were sitting around the table with a whole team full of superstars, Division I athletes, and they were really anxious because the coach was making them camp out for the first time. And they didn't know where they were going. They ended up camping in the backyard of their coach, right? Which is such a great way of just introducing this. But it spawned this conversation like who had spent a night in a tent? And very few hands had gone up. And who had spent actually a night sleeping under the stars? And no hands went up. And they turned to Caroline and they're like, Caroline, have you ever slept in a tent? She's like, yeah. And they're like, well, what's the longest you ever spent in a tent? She's like 16 days. And she's like, but I was 10. And their minds blew. But I think you're hinting at that we just don't have a structure. We don't know how to do it. We don't know, hopefully you had that crazy uncle or crazy dad or crazy mom who dragged you, goodbye, Tom, but you're right.
Yeah.
And how we see that these interventions of high school, of middle school, camping, we almost need to put that as part of our education platform.
I think so. I think it's becoming a lost art. We're seeing, less and less people in scouting where a lot of people learn how to camp. And, how do we give these real, what I think are life skills, right? Is you should be able to live in the natural world for at least a night, right? By yourself and figure out how to do that. And if you don't have that skill, you lose so much of the connection to what it's like to be a human on this planet.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly and I, one of the things we did in COVID was we got addicted to that show Alone, where people are just plopped out in nature alone. And we have a lot of outdoor experience between the two of us, and even we
primitive
feel
living,
like
we're not good at
primitive
it.
living is we have no skills and we wouldn't make it. So this may be exactly the opposite of what we're talking about, but I imagine some people are thinking in this way. Sort of, is there a role for technology in getting people out to nature, and or do things like what are those goggles called? The Meta goggles.
Virtual reality.
Virtual reality.
Sorry, VR goggles. Do you get any credit for doing things that are like naturey in VR goggles or in a video game format? Like, is that? I mean, that doesn't sound right to me. But
No, great
does that
question.
count?
I can answer both this. I have a virtual reality laboratory here at A&M, and so we actually bring people in and expose them to virtual nature. You can kind of think about virtual nature as the equivalent of a vitamin pill compared to real food, right? Where you get some of the benefits with a vitamin pill, but you're not getting the same as when you eat whole fruits and vegetables, right? And so we'll get some, especially because a lot of it's the sight and the sound, where you'll get those type of benefits. We're using them as an adjunct. And kind of what I say is virtual nature is great when you cannot get into actual nature. So one of our doc students here. She's over in aerospace engineering. And her study is looking at using virtual nature for long haul astronauts.
Yeah.
And she actually tested it on a Navy ship. She went out with these Navy guys over out at sea, where you're just seeing the same ocean over and over again, and found, real relaxation, that sort of thing. We've used it with some patients that come in that, we've used it with our oncology patients. So they're there, they can't move. We've used it with dementia patients, people that wander. And that's dangerous, but they actually get calmed down and stuff through the virtual reality. So the virtual side definitely seems, I wouldn't recommend it for your kids as as a replacement, but it's great for people that would have trouble getting into nature otherwise, or if the weather's terrible. The other side that we've been looking at is augmented reality. So, and we had Pokemon Go at some point where a lot of people were chasing Pokemon. And we've been looking at how we use those at historical and natural sites. So we have a place here called Dinosaur Valley State Park that has tons of dinosaur footprints. And we've been looking at can we use your phone to actually have the real dinosaur grow out of the footprint, right? And so you get that awe piece. And awe is a big piece of this we can talk about. But connecting kids to nature when they might be bored, like, oh, there's a dinosaur footprint, I'm kind of bored, but wow, a dinosaur popped out and I can see what this actually looks like. Or historical sites. You've got battlefields, we've got Native American kind of dwellings that are there where all the wood's missing. What would that have looked like? And can we use the phone to show what that would have looked like when it was actually inhabited? So I think both VR and AR can play a place in this.
That's interesting, because my purest self, I'm like, it's not.
Yeah,
pure
it doesn't
nature.
count. Yeah,
It
me
doesn't
too.
count. But I think really the goal is to set the hook as deep as we can. How important do you think it is to sort of be meta about it? That you bring consciousness to people, because I think people go outside, they might not make the connection that they feel better or that their mood has changed. How important is at risk? I personally hate gamifying everything. I'm like, do we really have to gamify everything? But I understand that is a powerful driver, and getting a nature score and nature dose really does tell you how much time you're spending outside in your neighborhood. Is it important that we just draw the connection for people over and over and just make it overt? That, look, did you feel better? Yes or no? Or does it just, we just program it so that kids have to walk outside and that's what we do? And,
Yeah, there's a study that came out a couple of years ago in physical activity. You guys have probably heard of it, but it was maids in a hotel room. And half the group was told, the work you're doing is physical activity and it's really good for your body. And the other half was told the work that you're doing is really important for the hotel and the guest experience. And they found that the physiology and the people that were told that physical activity was good for them actually changed more than the other group, even though it was just, they did the same thing.
Wow.
So I do think telling people nature's good for you and you're getting all these benefits is actually going to amplify the benefits even more. Not that you're not going to get benefits from nature, but if you like, oh yeah, this is actually really good for me, it should magnify the effect. And there's a couple things we haven't talked about, kind of the passive stuff, but this is one that blows my mind. Sunlight exposure, right? Public health, for years we've been telling people, wear a hat, stay out of the sun during midday, wear 15 SPF, etc. Don't go outside too much. And there's been a couple studies in the last few years, one out of the UK, right? British biobanking study, followed people over 10 years, tissue samples, everything, looked at high UV exposure compared to low UV. People with high UV exposure had lower all-cause mortality, lower cardiovascular mortality, and lower cancer mortality.
Would you just say that again
only
for everyone, please?
Yeah.
You have no
More
idea how excited Kelly is. Like you have to repeat that. Like
Yeah,
on
It's my one-man attack on the sun. Please carry on.
It's amazing. Being out in the sunlight more reduces your risk of dying overall, dying from cancer, dying from heart disease.
And I just want to be super clear. You're not advocating everyone go out and get sunburned, obviously.
No, don't get
But
sunburned.
what you are saying is, hey, you
sun
need
exposure.
sun exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, when I may have mentioned this before, when our daughter was born, they sent her home. She was a little preemie, Caroline, our tank. And they sent her home and they're like, you have to give her these vitamins. And I was like, no, I don't. She's breastfeeding. Like, Juliet is amazing that she's able to breastfeed. My kid's getting this mother's milk. I'm like, I'm not giving her these vitamins. They're like, you have to give her these vitamins. And I was like, look me in the eye and tell me mother's milk is not perfect. And they were like, wow. And I was like, what's the problem? They're like, people in San Francisco don't get enough sunlight. There's not enough vitamin D in the milk. And it was really interesting that we had this very complex intervention of this polyvisol nasty vitamin that I was going to give my newborn infant because Juliet wasn't going to go out in the sun. And we were like, oh, we can solve that problem.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, I'll just go outside. Sold.
And we put her, we literally put her in the sun.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You have no idea. So sorry, you mentioned that study and then you were going to speak to one other one, I think, as well.
So the other one actually estimated the amount of premature deaths that we have in the US due to inadequate sun exposure.
No.
340,000 deaths per year.
And what's the, it's just lack of sun exposure and tell us more. What are they thinking?
Not only is the vitamin D, I mean, vitamin D is super important, but actually there's an anti-inflammatory effect of UV exposure. And so it seems, especially with the heart disease, that anti-inflammatory effect is really, really important in living a healthy life. And then you get all the nature benefits on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dr. Andrew Huberman has been definitely sort of, yelling to the hills that people need to get early sun exposure. And, he's obviously very focused on circadian rhythm and all the other reasons to get sun exposure. But
Jack Cruz
yeah,
saying,
but
"Get a-
still,
get a
I
sun
mean,
callus."
there definitely are voices out there that are saying, hey, we can't be hiding inside. We need to get some sun exposure. And this is just even more fodder for that. So you mentioned earlier this idea of awe, and I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that. And a little bit on the context is we actually had Caroline Paul on our podcast, and she wrote a book called Tough Broad about sort of aging gracefully as an older woman. And one of her prescriptions in there is to get out in nature. And the women in her view that were aging well and aging gracefully all were spending time in nature. And she actually has a whole chapter about awe. So I'd love to hear what you're learning and what the role is from sort of a scientific standpoint.
Yes, and there's a great book out called Awe. And what they find, the number one awe that people have is from nature exposure, right? And we are getting that less and less because people don't get out. But getting to those national parks makes a huge difference. If you've been to any of Yosemite or Yellowstone or any of them, they're unbelievable. And the other thing we've lost is the night sky, right? It's so hard in most places in America to see the Milky Way, right? And you can get a star here and there, but you're not seeing the whole Milky Way. And so those moments of awe really seem to set us in terms of our psychology really on a positive spin. That really makes a difference in people's lives. It increases mood for days. Like it really has this long lasting effect of just, I'm part of something bigger than me, and changes your whole outlook on the world. And nature is the easiest way to connect to that. But we're losing it more and more as folks are not getting that big dose of nature in their national parks and those wild and natural spaces.
I was just thinking this summer when I think we were in Idaho, or we were up on the Snake Canyon, and I could not pick, we had no light pollution, no moon, and I couldn't pick out common constellations. I was overwhelmed, and I actually lost. I couldn't find the Big Dipper. Or I couldn't find...
Yeah, it was such an insane sky. Yeah. So you are I love this title, by the way. It's like the coolest title. You're the director of the Center for Health and Nature. What are your current initiatives? What are you hoping to study, looking forward to study? Like what's out there? What are you looking forward to? What's coming?
Yeah. So some of the big things we're working on, this is geeking me out. We're just starting in the field. We've got a neighborhood going up in Fort Bend County, right near Houston, suburb of Houston. It's what's called an agrihood. And an agrihood is a community built around a working farm.
Yes.
And so, which is amazing, right? And the guys the developers are like, we want to do everything right with the built environment, natural environment. So there's no pool. They're putting in a pond instead. They're doing all these nature walking trails. They're doing the design, so it's all tight. People have very small private yards, but big shared green space. And they're actually getting people there to connect to their neighbors. So we did a recruitment event the other day, and they sold about 60 units right now. It's not even open yet. And everybody knew everybody already. I'm like, these people know more of their neighbors now than I know in my neighborhood where I've been living for 9 years. And so that's geeking me out because we're going to follow them before they move in, 3 months after they move in, 6 months after they move in, and get everything from accelerometers measuring physical activity to veggie meters with fruit and vegetable consumption to nature exposure, heart rate variability, cortisol, etc., and compare it to a traditional planned community that doesn't have all those nature features.
Hold the phone. What is a veggie meter?
Oh, you can use it to look through
Is it
your
a
skin and
Vegemeter
it'll
or
tell you
Vegometer?
Yeah. I don't
which
know. I was like, we need one of those. How do we get one?
It's super cool. You can actually show it on your skin. It shows you how much fruits and vegetables you eat.
No way.
What?
Yeah, they're expensive.
Even
Oh,
Lisa
I was
was
like, wait, can I buy that at Walgreens?
I
Because
know,
I definitely want one.
they're thousands of dollars.
Oh, we're doing it.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
I can only use
Vegemeter.
it.
Swing by, check out the Vegemeter. This is amazing.
Yeah, I was like, you were talking. I got lost in the Vegemeter a little bit.
Vegemeter, right?
That's amazing.
You know, one of the things, and I haven't told this to Juliet. Sorry, I'm gonna just ambush you right now.
That's fine.
I came across this gym concept in Finland called Omni Gym, and they make real gym equipment that will stand snow, ice, and it has just a sliding weight that moves out on a moment arm.
No, I think you sent me
Did I
a
show
thing
you
about it.
Moment Arm?
Yeah.
But I am obsessed with this because I grew up with this park run, right? You run a little bit and then do a calisthenic. But it's awesome because I feel like that's part of my childhood DNA. And there was a kid in my Eagle Scout group who refurbished it. But this gym outdoors that could be used by anyone, and it's a real gym. Like you can
It's
really
just open for the public.
Open for the
Yeah.
public. That seems like one of the things. We drop that right down in a schoolyard on the base where there's open in woods. That seems like it would knock
But
out.
you see those, we see, like I've seen those. I saw them in Croatia, and we've seen
Some of them are hokey though. I think
they're a little hokey, but
this
like-
is not hokey.
yeah. What do you think about those? Have you seen those, like dropping a little gym equipment stuff out there?
Yeah, it's interesting. It depends a lot of times on the community you put them in. And I was out in South Korea, and all these older adults are working
That's
on all
right.
these outdoor
Yeah,
remember
we
that.
saw them in South
Yeah.
Korea too.
But you put them in the U.S. and they sit there empty, and I'm like, what's going on? So it's interesting. I it's depends on the community that you try to put them in and how they get adopted. I love the idea as long as we can get people to use them.
Yeah.
Okay, so besides, I think there was more than one thing because you had the agricultural community, and there were. I think you said there were at least a couple other things that you guys are excited about and studying.
Yeah, so we're going to launch the first big nature surveillance survey this summer. And so every 2 years, we'll survey a random sample of Americans on how much time they spend in nature, where they get their nature, their health outcomes. We're also going to have a child sample of that, looking at kids' time in nature.
Can we help with that?
Almost
Is
nothing to
is that something that we could put out, or would that skew your sample?
It'll be through. Yeah, we have to draw a random sample on that. I wish we could get people to do it, but yeah, it's one that we have to get. We want everyone to have the exact same chance of getting in, so that we get a representative sample.
Amazing.
So that's geeking me out, and I'm excited about that. And then let me think what else we do. We work with military families outdoors. So I work with the Defense Health Agency, National Park Service, YMCA, Wilderness Inquiry, and Blue Star Families to get active duty military and their families into nature, which is amazing and so needed. And
But those bases aren't great always.
no, a lot of them are really nature deprived. And so we do extended trips where we actually bring the whole family to national parks. That's through Wilderness Inquiry. And then they do these drop-in events where they do kind of, how do you ride a canoe? How do you do all the other things to get families in? And, it's just wonderful. Mostly our enlisted service members do, the ones that really, economically, this is a huge benefit for them and really helps their family, especially during times of high stress.
So my former national teammate Sue Norman was in the Army, and she was stationed in Garmisch, Germany, where Kelly actually grew up. And her job was teaching kayaking to service members because it was like a service member vacation destination, and that was
AFRC.
yeah, it
Armed
was
Forces Recreation Service.
yeah. And does that even exist
yeah.
anymore? Yeah, it was. And so anyway, I always think about her. That was like her actual job was to teach people how to kayak, and that's what she did in the military.
That's right.
Pretty amazing. I had a question and then I lost it because I was talking about Sue Norman.
Okay, we obviously.
I have it. I
okay,
have it.
go ahead.
Okay, so you said in the context of prescribing exercise, physicians doing it, that it really is sort of a personalized thing based on whatever it is.
Prescribing nature.
Prescribing nature and exercise in nature, on an actual prescription pad. But generally speaking, are you able to say, okay, average anybody listening to this podcast who's an adult, is there a number we should all be shooting for?
Is it
Because
that 120?
people, Kelly and I differ in this way, but like people like to have a number and something to track and understand what they're doing. We've recommended when Jared was on the podcast, we're like, download the Nature Dose app. You can get some really good information about your own habits pretty quickly. It's a really cool app. But what would you prescribe to like the everyday person listening to this? Like, how much time should we be spending in nature to get all of these amazing benefits of nature?
Yeah.
Per week,
There's
per month.
120. There's definitely there. I like to say 150 because that's the physical activity recommendation. I like saying easy to remember, 150 minutes a week, 2.5 hours, fairly easy to do, right? If you think of break it out for 7 days, try to get some every day though. I do think that at least 10 minutes a day is really important because of that micro dose of nature that you'll get that mood, that attention lift. If you can take part of your lunch break outdoors or a brief walk, that kind of stuff, that really helps. It's kind of like the move every day concept, like a little bit of nature every day, but try to shoot for 150 minutes a week.
And then one other question in our current environment, we're also connected even when we've left the house. So let's say walking in nature, but listening to a podcast on our earbuds with our phone in our pocket, does that kind of cancel out the experience because we've taken out some of the sensory, the sensory experience? Like, are we going to get
Every podcast person's going to hate you for asking.
I know. I mean, but I will say that's one of my, I love to put in my book and then go out and hike.
Yeah.
But am I really not getting the full benefit of it because, I've at least missed the sound piece?
So presence is definitely related to the effect you get from nature, right? So the more present you are, the more you're going to get an effect, right? So if you think about the one extreme is that forest bathing piece, right? And the other side is I'm sitting there on my phone doing TikTok or something like that. You're probably getting very little with the TikTok. I will say that I walk and listen to podcasts and books on, Audible books. That's how I get a lot of my nature. But then usually when I go hiking, I will keep the headphones out. And, it might be with a couple of people who might be talking a little bit. It's a great way to socialize. The more present you are. But if it's going to make you do it,
right,
have your headphones.
Right. It's kind of like a good, better, best scenario,
exactly.
right? Like you're still out in nature, but it's still great.
Thanks a lot, Juliet.
Sorry. Yes. Sorry, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. You ruined nature. Dr. Maddock, this is probably the most important podcast we've ever done. Where can people find resources, become more curious, maybe quantify a little bit this for themselves? Where do they go for more information? Some of your work.
Yeah, so we have an incredible group that we started just a little over a year ago. It's called the Nature and Health Alliance. And if you just Google that, our website will come up. It's got a ton of information. We summarize a lot of the research in there. Anybody that wants to can become a member. We have a small membership fee, $100 a year. You get all our newsletters. You can sign up for the newsletter for free, actually. And it's a great way to connect. And we do put a lot of research up there, all the cutting edge stuff. It's most of the leading scientists in the country are part of the Alliance right now. I happen to be the chair, so I'm a little biased, but great place to get this
The
information.
Nature and Health Alliance.
And we'll definitely link to that in the show notes.
And we're
going to
put that in the ambush.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I just want to point out that I can't tell if that's your table or your desk, but it's green in the background. So obviously you're walking the talk, and we really appreciate your time. And I know we've kept you after hours, after work. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, and thank you for all of your research and work in this area. I mean, we obviously are total nature enthusiasts, and we think it's such an important part of living well and living long. So thank you so much for all the work you're doing, and thanks for being here.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm a big fan of your guys, and you got me sitting on the floor in the evenings.
Oh boy. I'll just leave. I was just talking to my daughter this morning at college, and I said, "Hey, when you get back, let's sleep out in the backyard a little bit." She was like, "Yes."
Yeah.
So there it
Nice.
is.
There we go. There we go.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. Well, thank you so much, Doctor. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.